Again, I'm just
Okay.
putting us on live stream. Hi, Rabbi Menussi. I'm just going to properly introduce you. So welcome to our platform, the Nishmat. And we're so grateful to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. Rabbi Nir Menussi is an author and speaker. He has written several books on Jewish thought, psychology, and spirituality. He lectures widely worldwide and is known for his unique blend of philosophical clarity and psychological depth. And today he's going to be speaking about the wise-hearted woman, then and now. Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm going off. I didn't show my face. Okay.
Nice to meet you, and nice to be here. Shalom, everyone. It's my first time on this platform, and I'm very happy, very privileged to be here. So wonderful to see so many women. Wow, almost 100 have gathered here. That's so beautiful. Some of you I know your faces, I know your names. Many of you I don't know. So, oh, hang on, I'm just going to put my phone on make it silent. Okay. So, shalom, everyone. So our topic for today is the wise-hearted women. In our parasha, Parashat Vayakel, in the second Aliyah, we are told about the people of Israel volunteering various sub-materials and jewelry to the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle. And a special place is given to the women. So all the Jewish people volunteer of what they have, but it appears that the spirit of volunteering is more dominant in the women. And specifically, we are told that they volunteer and they actually make themselves the different coverings of the tabernacle. The yeriot, the strips of cloth that cover. Altogether there are 4 levels, but the 2 important ones are the first 2 coverings. The first are called Yeriot HaMishkan, the cloth that cover the tabernacle, and that's made up of various materials. There's blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine linen. And that's the first level. And then the second one, the more interesting one, is made up of goat's wool that was woven especially. And 2 beautiful expressions are used. The first, in regards to the preparation of the first covering, we are told that every wise-hearted woman wove, it's in the singular, every woman wove a piece, and all these pieces were put together, and that created the first covering. And then the second one has something even more powerful. It says, all the women whose heart carried them with wisdom. כל הנשים אשר נשא ליבן אותנה בחוכמה. So in the first verse, we're just told that every wise-hearted woman wove her piece of the yeriot, of the covering. And in the second one, they were all together somehow, v'chol hanashim, together, asher nasa liban otana bechokma. It's a very beautiful poetic verse that it's almost as if they're not doing anything. It's their hearts sort of bursting out, carrying them, and they also connect in a collective way. And then it says, tavu et hayizim. They wove the goats. Now, because it doesn't say that they wove the wool of the goats, it says that they wove the goats, then the interpretation that we have, quite well known, Rashi brings it, is that they had an extra special craft or knowledge. They were able to weave the wool of the goats while it was still on the goats. So the usual way of doing things is that you want to take a material, a substance that's coming from an animal, like a skin, leather, or wool, or whatever it is. First, you kill the animal, or you shear the animal. In the case of sheep and goats, you don't have to kill them, but you have to disconnect the material that you want to use from the animal, because the animal is moving and it's distracting, and you want to keep it quiet. So you want to detach. You want to disconnect the animal that's in your way with the wool that's what you want. But apparently there was some advantage. Maybe the quality of the weaving was better, or maybe the spiritual quality that was added to the Mishkan was different. But they had a thing in which they were first weave as the wool is being still on the goat. They would weave it and then they would cut it. So this is a very beautiful image of this feminine genius or feminine talent that's able to work with nature, work with the animal nature, the animal soul, the animalistic or natural or wild aspect of the world, to elevate it, refine it, right? To weave it into something higher than it is, but without disconnecting it. So you can imagine a person who wants to focus on studying Torah. So like a typical man would say, everyone quiet, I'm studying now. He would close the door, just like I did just now, to close the door, nobody's to come in. And it has to be in a very, sterile space that's quiet. And then they can start working. So first, if it's an animal is moving, you stop moving. Let me just cut the wool, and let's send the goat away, and then I can start working with it. I've disconnected it. I've objectified it. It's become an object. But the women were able to work to do the service of the Mishkan, right? To basically bring the divine into the world and elevate the world into the divine without doing this disconnect, right? They were able to do it. It's like a woman who's able to study Torah as she's taking care of the kids and cooking in the kitchen. She's cooking in the kitchen and listening to a Torah class, or she's doing a chavura over the phone while at the same time carrying a baby. That's basically a beautiful metaphor for this kind of talent. So we talk about, many times about women being better at multitasking, but it's far deeper than multitasking. It's basically saying that you're not shushing the world, and you're not shushing your own nefesh, your own psyche, and you don't submit it into, some sort of subservience. You don't frighten it into a state of being quiet. Is that instead of working on top of the world, you work within the world. That's basically the metaphor that we have here. So again, we have two coverings. The first is made up of linen and colored cloth. And that's relatively simple. That's every wise-hearted woman contributed a part to this. But then the second level is much more profound, and it has to do with the goats. And by the way, a goat is a domesticated animal. It's a kosher animal, it's a pure animal. But of the pure animals, probably the wildest, in the sense that it has the most azut. Right now we're in war with Gaza for a long time now. And Gaza has been a pain in the neck for a long time. And it all has to do with us being able to work with the property, with the characteristic of azut, the brashness or boldness, but to do it in a good way. So it's very interesting that they did all this specifically with the goats, with the izim. So all this created the higher covering to the Mishkan. And if you read it further down the same parasha, you see that there was something very interesting. The first level was made up of 10 strips of cloth that were put together. But the second level, the higher level, was made up of 11 strips of cloth. It was asymmetrical. In the first level, you had 5 and 5, one parallel to the other, and then they would be connected and create the first level of the covering. A second one has 5 strips of cloth and then 6. It's asymmetrical. And that extra one is something different. So the spiritual idea that's alluded to here is that the whole idea of the coverings of the Mishkan are what we call the surrounding lights of the soul. The soul has inner lights. Inner lights basically means the conscious lights, what we are aware of, what we can cognitively understand and appreciate and work with, in a regular way, that it makes sense. You can hold it in your hands, you contain it in your vessels, in your conscious vessels, and you work with it. But the coverings, all coverings, have to do with the super conscious levels, the surrounding lights, not the inner lights. And here we see that the surrounding lights split into 2 levels. This is called the near surrounding lights and the far surrounding lights, right? There's a near superconscious that is very special, but there's something even more special. That's the far, the more distant, the higher. That's you can even you. It's even harder to reach, which is uh, the makif rachok, the higher, more distant surrounding light, and that corresponds to the coverings of the goats. So we see here that both are feminine, right? We see here that something very interesting. Men are in the world, they have to do with the inner lights. The men were in charge of the kelim of the Mishkan and the building of most of the Mishkan, the kelim and the krashim, the planks. Most of the Mishkan, we are not told that women were so involved in this. So it appears that building the Mishkan itself was a masculine thing, but then covering it, putting the surrounding light, that was the feminine thing. So ironically, it's something that appears at first doesn't make sense, but then it makes a lot of sense. You think, so the men are in the world. So why do they have a hard time working with the goats, working with the noise, working with the mess? Because they are also in the world themselves. Because they're in the world, the other things that are in the world, they get in their place. The women are connected to something that's above the world, the surrounding lights, the coverings of the Mishkan. So because they're rooted in this higher level that's above the Mishkan, then they're able to work also within the Mishkan because they're not of this world as much as the men are, in a very interesting way, if you go along with all these ideas. So we have here this idea that the women have to do with the surrounding lights, both levels, but the extra special work has to do with the really higher one. The two levels are called Chaya and Yechida, right? We know the 5 levels of the soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, these are the conscious lights, and in this case, they're more masculine. And Chaya and Yechida are the two super conscious lights, or surrounding lights, and they are more feminine. And the extra special art has to do with working in the goats and weaving the wool as it is on the goat, has to do with the highest level, the level of Yechida, the Yechida of the soul, the most mysterious and deep and profound level. So that's the first thing very beautiful that we get here. Now look at something else. The two people in charge of building everything about the Mishkan, the two main men, right? It was said that the building of the main elements, or the Mishkan itself, not the covering, but the covering is what makes it whole, what completes it, what adds the inspiration. But the rest was built by men, and we have two men that are central. The two men that are central, their names are Betzalel, right, and Ahaliav. Betzalel from the tribe of Yehuda, and Ahaliav from the tribe of Dan. Now, if you look at their names, there's something very interesting here. Betzelel has to do with being in the shadow of God, right? Being in the shadow of something alludes to something like a tent or like a covering. It's not the thing itself. I am in the shadow. So the name Betzalel appears to allude at the covering, that they cast the shadow into on the Mishkan. So Betzalel his name alludes to the covering. He didn't do the covering, the women did it, but his name is all about it. And Ahaliav, even more beautiful. Ahaliav is Ohel. The first 3 letters of his name is Ohel. Ohel is the tent, the covering. We can even say more than that. Betzalel has to do with the first covering, because that's the part that casts the shadow, right? The moment you put the first one, you already have shadow. So you're in the shadow of the first level. And the second level, the goat skin level, is called the Ohel. That's called the Ohel. So Ahaliav has to do with the higher level. So hang on, it looks like they're taking what they didn't do it. Women did it. So they're called this way. What does that mean? So I think the most beautiful way of explaining this is that Betzalel and Ahaliav are very good in thinking about the surrounding lights, talking about the surrounding lights. They're named after them. It's like they're experts in thinking about the surrounding lights. But the women actually live it. They experience it. They bring it down. They actually realize it in the world. So you have a beautiful thing here. You can have, we're seeing this in our generation. We're seeing that we have many men who have been studying Chassidut for many, many years, and they know whole ma'amarim, by rote. And they can whistle it, and you can wake them up in the middle of the night, and they can recite all the sefirot and all the olamot, and they know a lot of Chassidut. I'm not talking about Jewish law and the Gemara. I'm talking about the spiritual part, Chassidus and Kabbalah. So many men, they know all the vocabulary and all the words and all the models and all the concepts. But there's one thing that's to talk about it, to understand it cognitively. Then come the women into the fold. That's a new thing that women are studying in-depth Chassidut. It's happening only for a few decades now. It's not that before there were exceptional women, but so many women studying Chassidut, it's a new phenomenon. But these women, they're not called after. They don't have the name Betzalel and the Haliav. Have to do with the Tzel and the Ohel. But when they get there, they just get it. They weave it. They understand it. They can take those surrounding lights and not say, okay, so we have, living down here, and then we have those higher realms over there. They actually go up and bring those lights into the world. They weave the surrounding lights into the world. That's the idea of weaving on top of the goat while it's still being connected to the goat. For them, the animal soul, which is being alive, being connected to the world, having emotions, having feelings, and talking about lofty things such as surrounding lights, it totally goes together. For the men, they would say, those surrounding lights are so high, there's something very theoretical, very spiritual. Don't mix it up with your feelings or with your day-to-day life. Your daily life has nothing to do with those great surrounding lights. But the women say, no, come on, it doesn't work this way. It's all one, it's all connected, it's all woven together. So this is another beautiful level to this whole thing. So first we just had the idea that it's the women who are in charge of the coverings of the Mishkan. And then we had the differentiation between the two levels, which is the close makif and the farther makif, and the farther one being the most profound, has to do with taking this azut of the goats and being able to work with it and elevate it. And then we have the differentiation between the men and the women. Now we're going to add another level. We can ask, who was the first woman to have this wisdom of the heart, this chokhmat halev? So there's a beautiful interpretation that comes in Chronicles, Divrei Yamim. It appears in the Targum of a verse there, Targum Yonatan, and he points to Miriam as being the originator of this wisdom and the first to weave the wool on the goats and basically teach the other women. She was the master. She was the one who knew how to do it, and she did it. And what is the verse? So the verse is a very mysterious verse, and he talks about Kalev, and it says that Kalev gave birth to a woman called Azuva and another woman called Yeriot. And then it says that Azuva passed away, and he married a woman called Efrat. And this is important because Efrat and Kalev here become the great-grandparents of Betzalel. It says that they give birth to Chur, and Chur gave birth to Uri, and Uri gave birth to Betzalel. Now, there are many weird women names here. There's Azuva, there's Yeriot, and there's Efrat, and we've never heard of them before. So Chazal, the sages, they're in the book of Chronicles, you have all these lineages, and they don't make sense many times. They don't connect to what we know from the Torah, and it's very confusing. So Chazal realized there's a lot of secrets going on here, a lot of mysteries. So basically they said that all three women here, although they appear to be three different women, and two of them appear to be daughters of Kalev, and one of them appears to be the wife, they say it's all the same woman. It was all Miriam. Miriam was his wife, but also a kind of daughter to him. Why? Because it says, and now here comes the whole explanation, it says that Miriam was very sickly. Miriam, her name, starting with her name, it has to do with bitterness. It has to do with the Egyptians embittering our lives. She was named after the bitterness of the bondage in Egypt. So if we have Betzalel and the Aholiab, who are named based on very spiritual, lofty concepts, Miriam is the very opposite. Miriam was named, she experienced the bitterness, the hardship of life. And it says she was very sickly and very pale. And so the paleness made her as white as a cloth. And that's why she had the name or how do you call this? Like a kinui, like a, not a nickname, but a kind of another title, another kind of name that was given to her was Yeriot. Yeriot is like the coverings of the Mishkan. And she was like as pale as cloth. It also says that nobody wanted to marry her. That's why she had another kind of description, which is azuva. Azuva is someone who's forsaken, who's no one wants her. Kalev Kalev did marry her, and because it says that everyone who marries a woman l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, nobody wanted her, and he did this great mitzvah of marrying her. It's as if he gave birth to her. That's why the book of Chronicles, Divrei Yamim, has them being described as his daughters. And finally, she became well, and that is the name Efrat. Efrat has to do with refuah. So now all four names it's all Miriam. Miriam, her name was Miriam. She was pale like a yeriot of a tent, and nobody wanted to marry her, so she was azuva. And then he did marry her, and she became well again, and that's why she's called Efrat, right? Now, basically, the idea is, then comes Targum Yonatan, right? The Targum written by Yonatan ben Uziel, the great Tana. And then he says that because of all this ordeal that God saw, that she was so forsaken and sickly and nobody wanted her, he gave her this wisdom as compensation. He gave her the wisdom of the chokhmat lev, the wisdom of the heart, to be able to weave the wool on top of the goats, which she taught to all the other women. Not only that, but we're told that after all this, when she became well again, she became healthy again, Efrat, she became the most beautiful woman. So we have here a woman who started out very sickly and pale and nobody wanted her, would experience the bitterness of life more than other people. She had this ability, that's how she led all the other women with the tambourines and with this dancing, because she was able to really experience the hardship of life. She found this man who loved her, and she was elevated and she became well until she became the most beautiful and one of the mothers of David HaMelech, of the Mashiach. So because of all this ordeal, she was able to learn this wisdom. What do we learn from this? We learn from this something very beautiful about the way women experience the world and what they can do with the way they experience the world. Women experience the hardship of life, the heartache, the pain, the worry, the sense of they're empathetic. Their own sufferings, they take very much to heart. You know, they don't brush it away like many men do. Oh yeah, so it's hard, but boys don't cry. So Jewish boys do cry, which is a good thing, but that's because they're connected to their feminine side. But the women are there at the very start. They live the heart. They live the heartache. They live the hardship. Not only their own, but other women as well. We saw that the highest level of the covering was all the women collectively, empathetically working together. So because of this hardship, that's where that art of weaving the coverings as it's on the go, taking the hardship of life, the azim, the kochot azim of life, and instead of trying to brush them away or suppress them or sink into them, wallow in them, that's also a danger. But if the woman learns how not to wallow in the pain, not to be drowning in the pain, but also not to brush it away, to grow from it, to experience it, and use it as an energy of growth and learning. This is what connects her to the surrounding lights. So the men basically, it turns out, they live in the middle level. They build the Mishkan. The Mishkan is on top of the ground. It's on top of the abyss of the pain, of the hardship, but it's under the surrounding lights. The women experience both extremes. They go down into the depth of the bitterness and the hardships, and they feel the pain of every woman who's azuva, who's not loved. When they themselves are not loved, they feel it, they know it. But that is also where the key is to growing and drawing from, weaving into the world, the surrounding lights, the light of Emunah, and the light of hope, and the light of new choices to be made, and new visions. You draw these lights, it comes to you because you're dealing with the hardships. And we can even say more than that. We can of all these names that Miriam has, some are good names, like Efrat, and some are negative names, like the other ones that we experienced. Miriam is in between, because Miriam also has to do with harama, with leharim. So Azuvah is negative, and Yeriot is negative, but Miriam is in between, and Efrat is totally positive. So and there are even more names, by the way. So some names are positive, some names are negative, and we can say that the first level of the Yeriot, the one that's made of the linen and the colored cloth, that came. It was a beautiful piece of work. That came from the beautiful part of her, the joyful part, the happy part, the positive names. But the highest level, the level of Yechidah that comes from the goat, that came from her negative names. That came from the parts of her that were suffering and dealt with the suffering, confronted it, worked with it, elevated it. And through those sufferings, through those tears, they reached even higher. And I'll conclude this with a beautiful allusion that the two names of the two levels of the surrounding lights, they're called Chaya, right, and Yechidah. Now, in a different place in the Zohar, it says that every heart that's really whole has two emotions at the same time. There's B'chiyah on one side, weeping, and there's Chidva, joy, on the other side. Now, there are several words for this, but the words that the Zohar uses are Chidva, joy, and B'chiyah, weeping. Why am I mentioning this now? Because the numerical value, the gematria of Chidva, joy, is Chaya, the closer surrounding light. But the numerical value, the gematria of B'chiyah, weeping, is, you can guess it, it's Yechidah. It's the higher level. So through the joyful aspect of Miriam, she learned how to do the basic art of weaving, which is the art of weaving that every woman worked on her own, and they did the beautiful first covering, the Yeriot HaMishkan, with all their beautiful colors. But from the sorrow, the pain, the tears, the crying, that's where she learned, that's how she got, as a compensation from Hashem, this wisdom. It came to her because she was suffering, through the suffering, from the tears, she was able, because she herself was in a way like the goat that needed to be woven into something higher while still being a goat, while still being connected to the heart, connected to the body, connected to the energy of this world. So she was herself, she had to do it on herself so she could do it on the goat. She had to take her aching heart and weave it and elevate it. And so from this B'chiyah, tears, she connected to the Yechidah, to the highest level, and came up with this beautiful art and taught it to the other women. And then they all knew it almost telepathically. It was something that they could understand and do it together. And that's the secret of the wise-hearted women, or some of the secrets. This was all based, by the way, on a shiur from Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg that
Wow.
we've been blessed in our generation to be learning all these beautiful things from.
Wow, that was unbelievable. Rabbi Menussi, so her godless, her Nevias came after she
No, she was
experienced.
Nevi'ah when she was young. She was Nevi'ah when she was a little girl, and she said that my parents are going to give birth to the Savior of Israel, right? She said that Moshe will be born. That's why she convinced her father to come back. She's called Miriam Neviah Achot Aharon, meaning she was a prophetess already when she was only the sister of Aaron, not the sister of Moshe, because Moshe wasn't born yet. That's what Chazal tell us, that she was from a very young age, she was a prophetess. But this wisdom is more than the prophecy. The wisdom of weaving the wool of the goat as it is still on the goat, and then creating those higher level coverings, that came through the ordeal of being forsaken and not being loved. Nobody wants to marry her, everyone making fun of her sickly, pale appearance, and all this, that through dealing with this agony, with this hardship, she was given this gift. And afterwards, she healed and she became very beautiful again.
I'm going to open it up to some questions, but I wanted to ask you a few things about what you said.
Yeah.
Do you think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made her pale and not wanted in order to bring her to this level of godless? Do you think that
Clearly, all of us. The reason that we have, so this is a class for women, we focused on Miriam and the women, but for both for men and women, the feminine part, the feminine aspect, the feminine perspective is the perspective that's able to bring emuna into the darkness of the world. And the darkness is there in order to reveal a new level of emuna. Every time we confront the darkness and the pain and the hardship, it's because we are called upon from on high to connect to a higher level of emuna, a higher level of spiritual growth, soul growth. And of course, she had all this. It's also, by the way, connected to the leprosy that she was at some point punished with. You also become very pale with that. Maybe that left a residue. So it's not mentioned as one and the same thing, but it goes together, that she had to go through all these hardships. And again, her name, the bitter aspect of her name, all goes to show. But then she was able to take this, just like when she was Pu'ah, who would soothe the babies. How could she soothe a crying baby? Because she identified with a crying baby. She felt that she was being born every moment as a crying baby that's really experiencing the trauma of birth. The birth is a trauma. This whole world is one big trauma in that sense, if you could look at it from the perspective of a baby that's just born. So if you are there, now, but the whole idea was that it wasn't a tragic story for her. She didn't have a tragic narrative. She had a very optimistic narrative, but it wasn't cheap optimism. It was optimism that was very realistic and very much present in the pain, in the hardship, and then took that and elevated that.
Would you say that we're seeing the rise again of this understanding of women that we haven't seen for a very long time for a reason? Like there is, as a woman who has women speaking all the time, I can tell you that what we're seeing is something remarkable that's happening in the world of the frum woman, right?
Yeah.
Something that is right.
This is the rise of the feminine. The Ari spoke about this. And he said that as we near redemption, then the feminine will rise and will become not only equal to the masculine, but in some ways will be
Greater.
the driving force that would inspire the masculine. So, and then you would have real balance because it would be mutual. There would be mutual bestowing and receiving. I see that other women are raising their
I know.
hands.
I'm gonna grab it. Okay. Who's the Zoom user? Is that Esty? The Zoom user, the first person. You have
She's
to
very,
unmute
very
yourself.
tsanua, very tsanua.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, so sorry. Thank you. Hello,
Go
Rabbi
ahead, Esty.
Menussi.
Just ask the question.
I will.
Esty, just ask. Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
asking. I, I, I got a feeling, and I don't know, that Miriam, who watched her brother Moshe in the basket, right, hid behind and couldn't let go, needed to keep an eye, right, on. We can see her empathy and her depth. Is that could be that kind of level of being able to feel can cause that paleness or can cause that look, right? It can hurt the body inside because you're so attached, and you could feel others' pain and your worry or your concern. But I'm not questioning, but she was the daughter of Aaron and Yocheved. Her brother was
Amram.
Amram and Yocheved, and her brother was Aaron and Moshe. What do you mean she wasn't wanted?
Right.
How could that
You
be?
see? You see? Yichus only gets you so far.
Right.
People want
but-
yichus and beauty. They want yichus
Right.
and beauty. And beauty sometimes trumps yichus. And many times.
But
Often.
so I want to get to the beauty
No.
thing, because it's a tricky thing now, right? Because sometimes in our world, like, beauty is poo-pooed, right? Like, and
Is what?
obviously it's like empty. You're an empty shell. And of course you could see HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the world with beauty. There's psukim on the Urios, and I don't have to go out and write all over the Torah. So, and if you just took this at face value, you see, she was sickly looking. They didn't want to touch her. She's not pretty enough. That sounds so.
Yeah, but it
Go
wasn't
ahead,
just
Esther.
pretty. She was, sickly. She conveyed something that was misken. If you give off the energy of being, depressed, it's unappealing. And so there was one man, a very special man, Kalev, who was able to see,
Was thought out of the
beyond that.
box.
Beyond that, yeah.
Thank you.
Then she became, and then he turned her. That's the beautiful, that alevai. It should happen to everyone. It's unfortunately a bit rare. It was rare also then. In other cases, so some very special women, they married to have this, and you see this happening. That you see someone who is, not very appealing or attractive, but then she marries all of a sudden to find this amazing guy who is able to see beyond all of that, see also her potential to be very happy if he makes her happy, and then he makes her happy. And for other women, it has to work the other way around. That first they have to learn from Miriam and from her experience of how to take the pain and not fall into a depressed state and to self-pity and wallowing in the sadness. They have to take it and elevate it, and then they'll become more, their beauty will come out. Her genes didn't change. She had the same genes, but she became beautiful. What does that mean? That her mood totally changed.
But Rabbi Menussi, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the chesronos in the men. Maybe the woman has the pnimius and the elevatedness of going beyond the external. It's maybe the main thing that has, the way that it's rare is maybe because it's the man that has difficulty that's so much more external than the woman is, because actually you see a lot of beautiful women with very unattractive men. And it's much harder to see it the other way around.
Yeah, because men are more chitzoni, of course. Men are more chitzoni. Right. Yeah, so you can say, all the men should be more pnimi and alevai, and I encourage men to be so whenever I have a chance. But the most important thing in working on ourselves is not to wait for others to change before we change. Right. That's the most important thing. Within a relationship, before the relationship, if you tell yourself the problem is with the other side, you're wasting everyone's time. And if you want to help other people change, work on yourself. They'll be inspired by you to work on themselves. So that's the most important thing. If I talk to men, I tell them the problem is you. If I talk to women, I tell them you have to work on it.
Adele, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Yes. Okay, great. So my question, Rabbi, is when women experience pain, in order to have that transformation to get to the other side, like she did, is it better to accept that pain that you're going through wholeheartedly and not fight it? Or if someone else is doing that pain to you, confront them, just accept it because that's Hashem's will, and that you'll ride that wave and get beyond it faster than if you confront that person that's doing that pain to you so that they realize, like, are you showing more emunah by being quiet, or are you
so now you're talking specifically about that the pain is caused by someone else?
Yeah,
there's the hardships that have to do with illnesses or with the kids or with the financial situation. You're talking about Okay, so here it's, of course, it's if it's something that God sent, there's no one to argue with. You have to work it on yourselves. If it's something that has to do with another person, then it's more complicated because it splits into two parts. One part is that in as much as this is not in your control, not in your hands, then you have to work on yourself. And you can't control the other person. But it doesn't mean you can't influence the other person. But you need to influence them from a place that is very, naki. It's like clean and clear. We see this with Sarah and Abraham, that when there's two incidents in which she's telling him what to do, and in the first one he doesn't listen, the second one he ends up listening. He doesn't listen when she's angry at him. She shouts at him, "Chamasi alecha, yishpot Hashem, and may God judge between us. You're not putting Hagar in her place, and you're not doing anything." And then he says, "Oh, she's your handmaid. Do whatever you want with her." And he's just backing up, backing away. But when it's time but when she is more matured, and she's able to tell him that it's time to banish, right, to send away Hagar and Ishmael, she's not angry, she's not shouting, she doesn't say God will judge. She's saying Garesh ta'amazad ve'ezma, right? It's very, and then Hashem also intervenes on her behalf and helps her get the message across. So meaning he was able to listen to her because she gave him the space. She didn't try to control him, but she didn't also stay silent. So it has to do with the way, and what was the difference between the first time and the second time, is that she started doing inner work. The name changed from Sarai to Sarah, and she matured and she started doing more inner work. So before the inner work, she was just angry at him, she lashed out at him, and when she lashed out at him, it didn't do any good. But when she was working on her part, and then she was able to tell him very, very straightforward, very cleanly, and this is what you have to do. I know this. I just know it. It's very obvious to me. It's very clear to me. And she was able to tell him and then let go. And then he had the time to hear God's words telling him she's right. You have to heed her voice. And then she got up first thing in the morning and did it. She was able. So why? Because she didn't lash out and she didn't tell him, you have to do this, you have to do this. I'm not letting go until you do this. No. She worked on her part, and then she was able to tell him his part, and then it worked.
Got it. Right. So in the situation that the person is not close to you, let's say, where it matters as much in terms of the relationship, when things are done that affect you.
You're thinking about a specific situation, but I don't have all the specifics.
Right.
So you have to translate and define the exact context. If it's someone that's not close, then maybe it's all up to you into working, and then maybe if you do your work, it'll in some mystical way it'll affect the other person. Maybe It's not for you to tell them anything. So I don't know the exact
right
details.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Rivka, go ahead. Hi, Rivka, you have to unmute.
Hi, shalom. Thank you so much, Rabbi. I know you've spoken in the past about Mashiach will be a couple, the wife of Mashiach. What do we know about the wife of Mashiach?
Oh, wow.
The same thing we know about Mashiach. Nothing. We know very little. We're not going to know how it is until it is. The only thing that is written or alluded to in several places is that while Moshe needed to abstain from his wife, to be away from his wife during the last 40 years of being a prophet, when he comes back as Mashiach, part of the rectification will be that he will not be away from his wife. That he'll be able to do what the Baal Shem Tov, what is in Chassidut is called being in-welt and ois-welt at the same time, in the world and outside of the world. Moshe was not able to be both. He was able to be outside of the world, but not in the world, in the sense that he was able to be a constant prophet and the level of the transparent pain, right? The spaklaria meira, totally different level of others. But not be with his wife at the same time. Miriam took issue with this. That's why she became a leper later on. She took issue with this. But it's explained in Chassidut that she has the final word, that she's right in the sense that Mashiach will indeed, her rebuke will become true in Mashiach that he needs to be both a prophet and married and with his wife and everything. And so because the feminine is rising, and in the Messianic times it becomes totally equal. So I don't imagine Mashiach being a king and having also a wife. They'll be king and queen. They'll rule together. Shnei melachim mishtamshim v'keter echad.
Wow.
Two kings using one crown. That's the Kabbalistic term that's used about the rise of the feminine.
Wow.
They will share the
Wow.
crown. So that's what I had the video called Mashiach will be a couple.
Wow. Okay, we're going to take one more
Darabah,
question
amazing.
because we're going to only take one more question because we have to finish our davening before it gets dark in Eretz Yisrael. I know that I just Mazal is left. I know somebody asked the same. Was it the same with Leah? Somebody who had to get off kept asking. She was waiting. That the same idea that you brought up with Miriam, was that the same idea as Leah had, right?
So
Because Leah
is more interesting. Leah wasn't sickly, and she was supposed to marry Esav, and she started crying because she became a Baalat Tshuva. She was, basically, the explanation is that Leah was wicked in the beginning. Leah, that's why she was destined to marry Esav. They were both wicked. But then when she heard that she is so wicked, she realized that started her cheshbon nefesh. And she realized that she wants to stop going in that direction. And she became a Ba'alat Tshuva, and she wept. And because she wept, her eyes became soft, right? Or there's all kinds of new translations for Enei Le'arakot, soft eyes, sickly eyes. But it all has to do with the fact that she cried a lot, and she cried because it was the tears of tshuva. So again, we have the tears, the b'chiyah that connect to the yechidah. She connected to her own yechidah through tears. But this time she brought herself into this pain, the pain of tshuva. She could have a great life in the wicked world, married to Esav. That she would have gone off, and they would have been a great couple, but in the world of the klipot. And she said, I don't want it. And so here we see that every Baalat Tshuva, there are many women or men, Baalei Tshuva, everything is great for them in life, everything is going well, and then they decide to go into yeshiva and to, go into the frum world, and then they become more intense and they work on themselves, and the other people look at them, so why are you looking for trouble? But they're saying, no, these tears, I'm putting myself into a hardship, into difficulties, into challenges, because I'm going to grow out of them. I'm going to join the world of Kedusha. So for Miriam, it was cast on her, those difficulties, that ailments or illnesses, whatever she had. And with Leah, it's different. Leah was everything. She was very healthy, but she got into this work of weeping and doing tshuva, and through that she elevated herself and married Yaakov and helped him elevate into Israel.
Wow, I had no clue that she was considered wicked. Wow.
Yeah, that's what the Zohar says. Leah is to say no to something. Say lo, right? Liot la'eh. To be, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore. It says shehi la'a mirish'ata. She was sick and tired of her own wickedness. Right? She became le'ah. Says like it's a big no to her own wickedness, and she's a big Baal Tshuva.
Wow. Unbelievable. Yeah. Mazal, go ahead. Mazal, go ahead, Mazal.
Thank you. I'm going to make it quick. Hopefully the answer is as well. It's a deep one. I live here in New York, and you were mentioning about Miriam and how she was single because of her sickness. But something is happening where I live. I'm seeing more women and men single longer, engagements being broken off, more and more are divorced. People is like, wow, you are divorced. Like, what is happening? Like, it's becoming so much more common. And in our community, it wasn't like that. Like 20 years ago, you would hear a few here, she's delayed. But now it's just more and more happening. Is there any connection with the timing of what's happening? Like, how can we understand this or do something about it?
So every story is different, but you can see that because we are in our generation, we are dealing with psychological depths that our forefathers didn't get to these levels. Maybe it was harder on the outside for them. The world was a harder place to live in. But because the world has become, generally speaking, a better place to live in, then other things are surfacing from the inside. And we're far more self-conscious. And it just means that there's a bigger challenge now to connect emotionally with the other gender, with creating a really meaningful, intimate relationship of sharing and dealing with our emotions and connecting emotionally and weaving our two neshamot together. It's become more of a challenge. And that means that a lot of people find it very hard. But it also means that it's possible. We have the capacity, we have the ability to do so, but we have to realize, we have to, muster our strength and our courage and understand that this is our challenge in our generation. And as couples, we're not going to be together, to marry, and we won't be able to survive our marriage and deepen our marriage unless we become far more present emotionally, psychologically, and really share and work with the others. It's not, I'm just saying it as like a slogan, but it's a lifetime's work. And it's different from couple to couple. And sometimes it has to do with letting go of your imagination, your dimyonot as to what a marriage is supposed to be. You think it's supposed to be something ideal and perfect and smooth and easy, and then and you have to really internalize that that's not the way it is. It's really hard work, and people have to realize this, and they have to really ground themselves in their reality, and also be able to acknowledge, that's maybe the most important thing, that the hard time that my spouse is giving me, it's all a reflection of things within myself. I may tell myself that I am better off than the other person, and everything for me is well, and I know what I'm doing, and I know where I'm going, and he's the problem or she's the problem. They don't know, they're so complicated, or they're not aware of themselves, they don't work on themselves, and it's all their problem. And the biggest challenge has always been, but it's now bigger than ever, is to realize that we can't run away to this very comforting self-image that everything is okay with us, or we're on top of things and the other person isn't. And we have to realize all these problems all these uh, difficulties that I feel that the other person is piling up on me, they're also within me. And that's why I'm getting this on me. And that's why I'm in this situation. I'm in this situation because I have to realize I'm also a mess. I'm also a mess. And if I tell myself the other person is a mess, but I'm okay, I'm running away from the tikkun. So the tikkun is that I'm also a mess, and I have also issues to deal with. And the more you focus on what you have to change and what you have to rectify, the less time and energy you have to look at the problems of the other person. And also they are inspired by you to see what it looks like that someone is taking responsibility for their own problems and working on those problems. And that can inspire them to work on their problems, which they do also have. And then we can really start talking. Once every person is very intently works on their own issues and acknowledges that they have issues and works on themselves, then they can start communicating in a deeper way. So it's a lot of work. We need a lot of good counselors and good people to inspire
But
each other.
I'm just curious, right. But it's curious, the last thing to finish us off, you talked about the women rising, the feminine rising, and Mazal brought up the fact of difficulty in marriages. We're seeing a lot more divorces, young people. We're seeing a lot more people remaining single for longer. I'm wondering also if it has to do with the fact that the woman is, there was a period of time when the masculine was the dominant, and that was it's what the male became very used to, the dominance of the male.
There's no tradition for men how to deal with the new landscape and how
right.
to
So that's what I'm thinking to myself. You have all these women that are really, I'm sorry, I see so many great women that I can't say enough about them, that you see these women that are mamish, the greatness that I
their
see in women today.
Don't compare. They don't do the same
No,
work.
but even the younger women, like I look at these women, these girls who are like changing the world in their 20s and learning different things. and you look to a certain degree, which is very, very interesting, because there's a level coming from the other side that's trying to almost stop that from happening, trying to not allow the girls to actualize or to become. They're telling them still to stay back, look like this, dress like that, don't speak like this, do this. And yet, so there's this there, but it's so interesting when you think about it. There is that aspect that's happening, and then you have this aspect of these girls and these women who are just like blossoming into these unbelievable, amazing humans that are just changing the world. And then you have these boys who are almost not, or who are hadrachad, who are brought up in a certain sort of vein that no longer exists. And it's almost that they can't develop these relationships, or they can't manage life within this new terrain. It's a very interesting thing. It really makes a lot of sense.
We should just add to this. So that's part of the growing pains of our generation, of the rise of the feminine and trying to come to terms with it. Both men and women have to adjust to a new era. But I would say two things that happen here. So one element is that men do not have a living tradition, an example from their own parents. Some do, but most don't, of what it's like to be an equal to women, of women being an equal to them. And they need to be also rise. Men have to rise up to meet the women who are rising. So part of the problem is men have to also rise up and be more than they became, more than they were. And also it's rising, but it's also going down into their hearts, into an emotional level of communication that's not just intellectual and cerebral. So men have to work on a lot of things that's new to them. The other side of it is that the women rising, it also has a klipa to it. It can rise in a negative way.
Right.
If they rise in a way that they tell themselves, they start looking down at the men and seeing the men as, pathetic or not worthy of them, and not as sophisticated as they are, and not as, whole as they are, and not doing all the work that they're doing, it's counterproductive. It's going to become worse and worse. Because the man depends on his wife and on his feminine counterpart, even if it's dating, to believe in him and to give him the koach, and to also, in a way, look up to him. Even though she's rising on one level, she still also has this dependency, a good dependency on the man.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs to feel that. He needs to feel needed and required, and that he has a role in the world, that he has a purpose. If he's not needed, if men feel that they're not needed, it's the most destructive thing to a man in the world. So the men have to rise and have to learn and have to deepen their work and study Chassidut in a deeper way than they did before, and to connect to the Torah and to connect to their neshama and connect to Hashem and connect to themselves in deeper levels than before. Absolutely, that has to change. But the women have to be careful not to let that aliyat nukva, that rise of the feminine, to get into their head. Meaning they can say, I am rising, and we're all rising, but at the same time, I also have that place of the classical kind of woman who's saying, I need a man, and I need a man to be strong, and I can give him the koach to be strong and to be much more than he is right now, but I mustn't make him feel humiliated in any way, or diminished in a way. I need to empower him, not diminish him. So there's two sides to this whole thing.
It's so true.
Everyone is challenged. Everyone is challenged to balance what they have with what they don't have.
It's so true. And it's so interesting what you're saying, because when you think about it, when you look at the imahot, they had the ability to be high, to really rise, but to understand of how to bring that into their husbands, and how to bring bring their husbands up with them. And even when you see that they did things that were, how Rivka worked, or how Sarah worked, and did it in the way that they wanted to do it, but they did it with chokhmah, without making their husbands feel
the wisdom of women.
They did it without making their husbands feel not that value of who they were. It's so true. It's so true. And I guess that's the way the rising of the feminine has to come into that chokhmah of being able to put the two together.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Rabbi, this was unbelievable.
Baruch Hashem.
Unbelievable. So beautiful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
This
much.
was incredible.
Pleasure to be here, and I look forward to seeing you in other classes and contexts.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We just have to finish off our tefillahs. So please don't